Hello Linda, it's Emily Goddard and this is Gin, and today I'm going to be talking about how to do a stand, a stay and loose lead walking with the 8 different techniques mentioned. The first thing to talk about is that I'm going to be using a clicker. So a clicker is a bridging stimulus in between the response that Gin gives me and the primary reinforcer that I'm going to give to him, which is cheese. It's also known as a secondary reinforcer or a conditioned reinforcer. We're doing this in a low-level distracting environment, so although it might look quite distracting because we're outside, we've got lots of dogs and it's probably better for Gin to be out here away from all of them. So the first thing we're going to do is learn and reward. So with learn and reward, the good thing is that you can add the cues straight away because you've got the cheese on the end of the dog's nose and the dog will be demonstrating that behaviour. The downsides to it are that there are arguments against whether the learning can actually happen. So if the dog's just blindly following the cheese on the end of its nose, it's probably not learning the actual behaviour. And similarly, if it's just blindly following cheese, it might not be learning the cue that's associated with that movement. So this is how if we were going to learn and reward a stand, we'd put the cheese on the end of the dog's nose, move it forward, stand, and that's how we do that. If we were going to learn and reward a stay, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because if you want the cheese on the end of the dog's nose all the time and you want to create some distance from the dog, you're going to have problems, because you pretend the dog stay, and so in reality, if you then try to put that stay into a normal life situation, the dog wouldn't do it because you're not there with the cheese on the end of its nose. So that kind of proves the argument that the dog's not actually learning the behaviour properly. If we were going to do some loose lead walking with learn and reward, we'd have the dog beside our side, we'd have the cheese on the nose, and we'd reward every few steps that he stays beside our side. So I think that's learn and reward covered. The next is lure and click. So this is really, really good if you've got a crossover dog, so maybe an older dog that you've only just introduced to clicker training, or even if you're a new trainer, so you're used to luring the dog and rewarding it, but this gets a little bit fancier and you get to add the clicker in. It's really, really reinforcing for the trainer because you're using a clicker, but you've also got a really high success rate because you're showing the dog what to do. But similarly to learn and reward, there's arguments against whether the dog's actually doing any learning and also if the luring's becoming part of the behaviour. So if we were to you'd say stand, click, and then release the treat. If we were to lure and click a stand, we'd have the treat on the dog's nose, we'd say stay, click and reward. If we were to lure and click loose lead walking, we'd have the dog beside us, here, treat on the nose, and after every couple of steps, click and reward. You've got to make sure that the reward comes after the click because it is conditioned. So it doesn't actually matter if you've got a few seconds gap in between clicking and giving the dog the treat. It doesn't matter, they've still got that connection in their mind. Yeah. So the next thing we're going to talk about is stimulating. So stimulating is using the environment around you to influence teaching a behaviour. So the downsides to this is that whatever you may use in the environment, so a wall, a chair, a box, might become part of the behaviour, and it can be very difficult to fade that addition to the behaviour. The good thing about it is there's no physical interaction, so you're not moving the dog, you're not making them go anywhere, and it's a lot more likely that they'll be learning from the process. So if we were to stimulate a stand, we might be sat down with the dog, or we might be stood still, sit. And as we go to move off, stand. The second the dog stands up, we click and we reward. Similarly, we might be sat down and we could stand up to move off from a chair, and then the dog's probably going to get up and you could click and reward. To stimulate a stay, it's tricky to demonstrate this one here, but a good way to do it would be to put them behind a baby gate or in a crate or behind French doors so that they couldn't move to get towards you, then you slowly build up the distance and reward. If we were going to stimulate loose lead walking, we'd have the dog against this wall here so that he couldn't move, unless he climbs up the wall. And then we'd move, click and reward. So there's no way that the dog's going to be pulling away from us because there's a wall there. Next up is modelling. So I'm not going to demonstrate this one on Jim because he's not really very comfortable with being handled, and that's actually one of the downsides. A lot of dogs can find it really, really stressful to be manipulated and moved into the position that you want them to be in. The good thing is that it can prepare them for a trip to the vets. If you can make them comfortable with being modelled, taking blood at the vets or having an examination is going to be a lot easier. And also the behaviour will definitely be happening because you're putting your dog into that behaviour. There's no way that they're not going to do it. And as a result of that, you can add the cues straight away. So modelling a stand, if your dog was in a sit, you could put your hand under their chest, under their back end and lift them up. Give the command stand and release the treat. If you were to model a stay, the easiest way to do this would probably be to have your dog on a lead and loop the lead over something, such as a gate post, or we hook it over there. Tell the dog stay, move away, click and treat. So that's how you model a stay. Either that, or you could try and keep your hand on the dog, but similar to the learn reward, you're not really teaching them anything. If you were to model loose lead walking, you would probably have to have the dog on quite a tight leash. Now Jin doesn't tend to pull, but you could have him here and you could keep tight hold of him so that he physically couldn't pull, he'd be kept to you. You could also use your hands to move his bottom back into your side. But again, he's probably not very comfortable with that. Now capturing is clicking and treating for a behaviour that occurs naturally. So something that the dog will be demonstrating on its own. Now that's a really good thing because you know that the dog's not going to do anything outside of its comfort zone. It's unlikely you're going to be able to capture it doing something really uncomfortable that it doesn't want to do. So you could capture a sit really easily because dogs sit naturally. You click and you treat when they sit, and then hopefully that would go into their behavioural repertoire and they'd be able to remember it and reproduce it. The bad thing about it is that the trainer's got to have really good observational skills and timing skills, and it can be quite tricky to get the click on point. So if you thought you were clicking when the dog was sitting, you could actually be clicking when it's lifting its bottom off the ground or just as it goes down, and you could capture the wrong behaviour. It's the first stage of shaping as well, so it's a process that can be really developed and moved into something new. You'd capture a stand just by waiting until the dog was standing, click and treat. You could capture a stay by moving slightly away from the dog, and when it stays in position, click and treat. And you could capture loose lead walking by waiting until the dog naturally comes beside your side as you're moving, click and treat. So next up is shaping, which as I said is the next stage on from capturing. So with shaping, you've got to really think about the criteria that you want to develop. So you've got to break every behaviour down into really small increments. So for example, if you were teaching a spin in your dog, the first thing you might look for is even just a tiny turn of the head or a flick of the eyes to the side, and you'd capture that. They'd reproduce that and you'd develop that slowly so that in the end the dog was turning the whole way around and you'd have your spin behaviour. We tend to add our cue at about an 80% success rate. So when the dog 8 times out of 10 is offering that behaviour consistently and reliably. The good things about it is it allows you to really specifically develop behaviours that you want to capture. So if you were looking for really high quality obedience heel work, you could use a clicker to shape those behaviours so that your dog's back end was really tucked in and it was all 4 paws square or whatever it is that you wanted to develop. The bad things that it requires a lot of planning. So we have to plan each increment of behaviour that we want to capture, and sometimes that doesn't go to plan. Sometimes the dog might suddenly demonstrate the whole behaviour and we just have to go with that. But the other thing is that it can be quite frustrating for a dog. So if you're clicking at the wrong time, or if you're clicking too soon, too late, the dog might reproduce that behaviour that they think you clicked for when really you were clicking for the little bit after it. So it's really, really precise. And that's the thing about a clicker, it's a sound that can't be confused with anything. So that click is really defined, really precise, whereas with a verbal command we might say yes or good boy, and that could change each time. So a click is used to really capture a precise behaviour. Next we're going to talk about targeting. So Jin knows a really quite solid nose, good boy. That's Jin's version of a target. You could also use a target stick like this, or I've got a mat that I use targeting for my agility dog. The problem with this is that at some point you have to fade the target out of the behaviour. So you can't always have a mat in the agility course, and you can't always be putting your nose out to a dog. your hand out to a dog, sorry. And the good thing about it is it can be really, really flexible. So you can use this target in any environment to develop most different behaviours. So for example, if we were to target a stand, and then we could start adding in the cue. So just as he stands up, click, good boy. And you give the command stand just as he stands up. Stay. We could definitely target stay, and Jin doesn't actually know the target stick, but if we were to target a stay, we'd have him pressing his nose on the end of this, we'd have him sit, good boy, and then you could keep him there while you move away, click and reward. And then you start adding in the stay cue, and then eventually you'd fade this out and you'd have quite a reliable stay. Loose lead walking also, lost the clicker, Jin, you could, here, you could tell your dog nose, 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 good boy. And there you've got him walking calmly beside you. Then you slowly change your criteria and have the noses at a lesser frequency, and then you'd have loose lead walking. The last one to talk about is 300 peck. So the idea of 300 peck is that you're repeating a behaviour and increasing the distance or duration up to 300. So if you were using a stay, you might stay for 1 second, reward, stay for 2 seconds, reward, and you'd go all the way up to 300. And the idea of this is by the time you get to 300, they know that behaviour. Unfortunately, if the dog fails at any time, you have to go all the way back down to 1 because the dog doesn't understand. So this can be really, really time consuming, and it's a really long process to do, but the results are usually really, really reliable, and it's thorough, and it's really, really good for increasing distance and duration in any of your behaviours. So if we were to use this to do a stand, stand, 1, 2, and release. And we go stand, 1, 2, 3, and release. If we're using it to stay, we tell the dog to sit, 1, reward, 1, 2, reward, 1, 2, 3, reward. And you should be able to build the distance up, or the duration up, all the way up to 300. So that's all the behaviour. Oh, loose lead walking. So the idea is that you'd go 1 step, reward, 1, 2, reward, and you build that all the way up to 300, and then you should have a pretty reliable loose lead walk. So that's all the different techniques and all the different behaviours covered now. So the next thing I want to talk about is how to build a really solid relationship with your dog. Now this can be done through going on different walks, varying your walks, exploring different parts of the country. It can also be done by doing lots of different activities together. So there's a huge range of canine sports that you can take part in. Agility is really good for developing the relationship. Competitive obedience, rallyo, canicross is another really good one, because that way you're both doing something you really, really enjoy. And you can go out for runs together and you can see different places, you can do competitions. Another good thing is to also give your dog some downtime. So just let your dog be a dog. Sometimes you need nights where you just curl up on the sofa and don't really do much and just have some cuddle time. But it's really important to make sure that you let your dogs be dogs. So out on a walk, you might have a grade 7 agility dog, but they're going to roll in a muddy puddle every now and then, and you've just got to go with that. The other things that can be really, really good is T-touch. So T-touch is almost a massage technique that's used to really relax your dog. And it's relaxing for the owner too as well, to be honest. And that's really, really good for improving the bond. You could do it of an evening or before they go into a stressful environment. And the other thing to think about is in a multi-dog household, making sure you spend time with individual dogs. So I've got 6 dogs at my house, but I always make sure that my agility dog definitely gets her own walk on her own, and each dog gets cuddles to themselves, and so they can really, really enjoy their time just with me. I think that's everything. Thank you very much.